Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking to you about childhood obesity. I'm Anne.
I'm Deva.
I'm Drew. And I'm Sibi. So to get a grasp of why childhood obesity is such a prevalent issue, we're going to lead you through some statistics. So currently there are 14.7 million children around the world that suffer from obesity. 1 out of 5 children in the US are considered obese, and the BMI you need to have to be considered obese is 30.0 or above. So we all are here to understand why childhood obesity is such a problem right now. Obviously, obesity has obvious health impacts, but the most common ones are heart diseases. As you can see in this gray diagram, there are 2 types of fats, subcutaneous and visceral fats. Individuals that are high in visceral fats are more prone to high blood cholesterol and high blood pressure. And when the combination of these act on the heart, it can lead to strokes or other heart diseases like heart attacks. So obesity can also cause diabetes through the dysfunction of insulin-producing beta cells, but this is rare. It's most commonly organized by these hormones and substances in the body that produce insulin-resistant properties, and when they build up, the individual has high insulin resistance. And this condition is also known as hyperinsulinemia, and that condition is linked to many cancers such as the colon, kidney, prostate, and endometrial. And with high amounts of fat tissue comes high amounts of estrogen in females, and high amounts of estrogen is linked to breast cancers in some individuals. Finally, fat tissue has hormones called adipokines, which are linked to cell proliferation and inhibition. And some adipokines increase with the number of fat tissue cells, and those cell proliferation adipokines, when they increase, over cell proliferation happens, and that means cancer.
So not only does childhood obesity create physical health impacts, but it can also create detrimental effects on a person's mental and social environment. Studies have shown children with obesity have higher rates of feelings of loneliness, anxiety, depression, self-esteem, and lower self-reported quality of life. According to a study conducted by the National Library of Medicine, children with obesity were 32% more likely to have depression. Obese children also face bullying and stigma, which inhibits them from creating relationships with others. The OECD reports that girls with obesity are 3 times more likely to be bullied than healthy weight girls, and this ratio is 1.8 times in boys. Furthermore, being rejected in school causes children to be more likely to have poor attendance and drop out. They are less social, lower attendance, and they show greater risk for later conduct disturbance and substance abuse.
So here's the role of the food industry. So in terms of school food, around 4.9 billion lunches are served to students in a year, which show that many students depend on this form of nutrition on a daily basis. And in specifically California, 60% of all schools don't reach the nutrition requirement. And though this may just be for California, it does have implications around the world, as the common school meal comprises of 51% unhealthy fats, which is really bad for children who depend on this type of food. And for fast food, in terms of fast food companies, they seem to be a large contributor to childhood obesity, as around 20% of children that live in a half-block radius of fast food stores are considered obese. And with a high calorie count but low nutrient value in these fast food products, it's very bad that 36.3% of all children in the world consume fast food in a day. And so another problem is, a simple solution would be to ask fast food industries to change their products, but it's not really that simple, as these products allow fast food industries to gain great monetary value, and they may not be really willing to amend their products.
So another huge problem that is affecting childhood obesity right now are the ethnic disparities. So on this screen, I have the lowest affected group by childhood obesity, which are Asian American Pacific Islanders, who are only comprised of about 9% of their children who have childhood obesity. These are the 2 highest ethnic groups that have childhood obesity as a prevalent problem in their groups. So Hispanic Americans are the second highest, with 26% of children being obese, and Native Americans are the highest, with 50% of their children being diagnosed as obese. There's a huge gap that you can see between these groups, and I'm going to tell you guys why that is. So there are 2 main different factors that can contribute to this, right? And firstly is the role of parents. So studies have found that Asian American parents have been doing a great job of not only modeling healthy eating habits for their children, but also promoting the consumption of lobster fruits and vegetables, which is an area where many Hispanic American and Native American parents have been reported to be lacking. Additionally, we have the cultural perceptions, right? So a large sample of Latina mothers was surveyed, and over 90% of the mothers agreed with the statement that a thin child shows not only that they are unhealthy, but also is seen as a sign of bad parenting. So cultural perceptions can further childhood obesity in certain ethnic groups because it perpetuates the notion that children need to be larger. And then finally, some income disparities. So as of right now, children that are in the lowest income groups are about 18.9% likely to be diagnosed as obese. On the other hand, children whose parents are in the highest tax brackets, making them in the highest income groups, are only about 10.9% likely to be diagnosed with childhood obesity. That's almost a 2 times difference in their likelihood of being diagnosed with childhood obesity. And one main factor of this is that many parents who are in lower income groups cannot afford the high nutrient-dense foods like fruits and vegetables. So they opt for lower nutrient-dense options like foods that you can find in a convenience store that are really not that healthy. So those are some reasons why there's a huge gap between where we see childhood obesity. And we need some solutions to fix this problem. So the first solution that we came up with was increasing access to healthier foods. So this would be targeted at poorer communities, and many minorities are disproportionately represented in poor communities. So this could also help deal with the disparities in different ethnic groups. So there would be 2 parts to this solution. The first would be to implement government subsidies, and that would essentially bring down the price that lower income parents would have to pay for these healthier foods. And then the second part would be to create more healthy food stores. So as you can see, we have a Whole Foods store, which would be greater than the convenience store, where many low-income people are currently shopping for their groceries. And through this, we would increase access to healthier foods. So there are many pros and cons to this. Some pros are that we would provide access to healthy foods, and this increased access would encourage people to eat healthier. But the cons are that these subsidies can be very costly, and there's no guarantee that people will change their eating habits. So the store owners might be less incentivized to actually open these stores if they don't think that they're going to get a profit.
So our second solution is to increase the physical activity children partake in. So we would do this by implementing a more rigorous physical education curriculum throughout a child's schooling. And we want to ensure that these kids get at least 1 period of physical education per day, but we also want to incentivize them to be more physically active by rewarding them with extra credit or some sort of other reward if they may not be responsive to extra credit, to influence them to do physical activity outside of work and maybe take a video or submit proof of doing that work to certain administrators. And we'd also want to host recreational activities such as basketball or football games for the community to provide some sort of a fun activity that kids can participate in while still being physically active. But some towns already have these sort of recreational programs, but in order to make them more inexpensive, we could provide them with free equipment that could be paid through from this program or could just be provided from like local high schools. And here's some pros and cons. So pro would be that it makes physical activities more accessible by providing people with a generalized public station to go to for physical activity. And another pro is that it increases the amount of physical activity a kid gets in a day, which is important because right now they're obviously not getting enough. And another important aspect of this, it may help kids in the future, as if they continue on this track, they may continue to be more physically active in the future. One con with this solution is it could take some time to develop this program, as we'd have to update current curriculums and maybe create some new ones in places that may not have a sort of updated version of physical education.
And so our third solution is creating a more healthier food environment. And we can do this in 3 different ways. The first idea is we can restrict promotional marketing on unhealthy beverages and foods that have high concentrations of salt, sugars, fats. And this is always marketed on like media such as like internet and like television. And in place of these things, we can market healthier alternatives on the same media forms, and we can also tax sugar-sweetened beverages. And if we make them more pricey, people are more likely going to choose the healthier and affordable options. And we can also require front-of-label packaging, and this basically shows the consumer these are the problems with the food you're buying. For example, here's an example of the label. It shows that there's low saturated fats, but there are high sugars, and that makes the customer aware of that. And it can be color-coded, so the consumer knows what they're buying. And the pros are that it raises price. The pros are that it reduces temptation for junk food, as children are less exposed to it. And it can also be implemented nationwide, and it raises awareness about the toxic chemicals that are used in food. And companies are more likely to change the ingredients that they're using if they realize that they have to display it on the front, as consumers might not buy it. But the cons are that some companies are not willing to comply, and they might boycott, and it's going to take a long time to like create these laws, and time to implement the labeling system, and also time for people to understand the meanings of the different labels.
So the choice that we came up with was our second solution, and that was to increase physical activity for children. We thought that it would be the easiest and quickest to implement because there would be no mass legislation or other forms of legislation that we would need to enact or bypass through. It would also receive no pushback, and it's pretty cost effective. We wouldn't need to go through big corporations whose interests might lie elsewhere.
And that's our presentation. Thank you guys so much for listening.
So I'm going to ask each of you folks a question. All right, we're going to start with Anne. What is a way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about your own individual research?
So my individual research talked about the ethnic and economic disparities, and when I was initially doing the research, I was thinking more about what we needed to do in the present moment, right? Because you can see those numbers, there's a huge gap between all the different ethnic groups and how they're impacted by childhood obesity, and as well as economic groups. So there was a huge problem, and I was focused on solving the problem right now. And so we picked solution 2, right, which discussed like implementing new physical activity in various towns to increase the physical activity that students underwent in a certain day. And even though when I had first done my research, I was focused on what can we do today to change these disparities, when we came up with this solution, it made me think, okay, well, changing things today would be great, right? But we need to change things for the future as well. So it made me realize that we need to implement more equitable solutions that all types of communities can support, including poor income communities, which can get funding from these programs, which would help them sustain these programs, and would also help ensure that in the future as well, these economic and ethnic groups would not be harmed by childhood obesity as harshly as they are today, as opposed to just focusing on what I had initially, which was, okay, we need a solution for right now, what can we do like right this instant to fix the problem.
Okay. Deba, give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about CIBI's findings.
Well, CIBI mainly focused on the scientific lens and the different health effects that childhood obesity could cause. And while I was initially aware that childhood obesity was a problem, I didn't really realize to the extent of the problems that it would cause. For example, CIBI talked about how it caused cancer and heart disease, and this really showed why this is a problem that we need to fix. And we also really tried to incorporate this in our solutions, as that is why we chose solution 2, because solution 2 mainly talked about increasing physical activity for children. So if we increase physical activity, we can therefore reduce children's chances of getting such diseases. So that's my answer.
Okay. CIBI, which group member's individual report was the most influential in the team solution?
I think that Anne's research was the most influential because it gave us like a macro point of view on how these different ethnic groups and these different minorities are being affected by childhood obesity, and instead of our lenses focusing on a more micro view on like just the health impacts or just the food companies, Anne's view gave us a more macro view and allowed us to like really zoom out and view the problem as like it allowed us to like see the problem as what it truly is, not just a specific part of it.
Okay. And then Drew, what do you feel was Deva's greatest contribution to the group's final argument?
Well, Deva's paper really talked about the societal effects of childhood obesity and how kids in school are like actually like experiencing like bullying for like being oversized, and so that really played into how we could implement a sort of physical education program for actual schooling to help them increase their physical output in school if they're not being able to get it out of school, as well as reduce the amount of bullying they receive.
Now you folks